the excerpt that relates to me when I first worked in Parliament in 1974. At the time I was a 25-year-old NZP journalist, and I was the only woman, as you said, in the first gallery, but I was constantly reminded about this woman who worked there before me. Parliament was very male then, as most politicians and media were men. But one curious feature was that I found myself getting very tall when walking along the parliamentary corridors. At 5'6" I was a reasonable height for a woman, but shorter than most men except in Parliament. There it seemed practically all the men, the politicians and many of the male journalists were mostly shorter than me. I began to think that it was the short men who were the strongest, the most determined and aggressive debaters. It was as if they had to rely on humour or debating as short boys at school because of not competing physically. Then they could further develop those traits as successful politicians or journalists. Toward the end of 1974, when I was working in Parliament, I went to the pre-Christmas drinks, put on separately by both the ruling Labour Party and opposition National Party. I was again reminded of my female predecessor's sexual experience in the Speaker's chair, and I tried to stay away from that. Despite being nowhere near the Speaker's chair, I was grabbed from behind by a man at one of those functions. Coming up behind me, he wrapped his arms around my waist and clutched me towards himself, pulling me slightly off balance. I clenched my right fist, swinging that arm forward, and I was about to jab it backwards to elbow my attacker sharply, when I glanced back and saw it was Siki Polio. He had been one of New Zealand's longest serving Prime Ministers before stepping down in 1972, but he remained in the National Party opposition. I hastily stopped my elbow, striking him in the ribs, thinking, I couldn't hit such an eminent man. He guffawed in his deep guttural voice. He loosened his arms but kept one around me as he turned me around, demanding to be introduced to me. I stepped back out of his grip. I was feeling annoyed and abused to some extent by his actions, but I didn't think I could challenge him there. I identified myself as an NZPA reporter and excused myself. He later became a Governor General for New Zealand, but I had no further contact with him. I think, as Annette suggested, it was really common behaviour for men of that era, particularly older men with younger women. They just treated them like objects in some ways. You know, they adorned their office or their social life. They never seemed to treat younger women as real people. And I was going to tell you a bit about the title Struggling to Fly, because it relates to two parts of my life. As a child, I used to dream a lot about flying. I think most children do. And in those dreams, I was always very good at flying, but I was often not very good at taking off or landing. Arms would come and drag me down, I would get entangled in bushes. And I think to some extent my adult life has followed that pattern. In the 2 decades that I write about, the 70s and 80s, I believe I was substantially flying for 2 periods. But I also crashed and mingled with things on the ground at other times. My definition of flying as a child would have been having fun, being happy and functioning. Now it is being in a high level of intuitive consciousness, which also involves being happy and functional. Over those same 2 decades, I had 3 good editors who helped me considerably, and some bad ones. The first good editor, I think, had a patriarchal interest in me, and I was sort of like treated like the favourite grandchild amongst all these journalists. The second good one had a sexual love interest in me that was never acted on. And the third good one was neutral. That was in the mid-1980s, and it was the first time in my journalism career up to then that I had an editor who treated me like a professional journalist and was mainly interested in my output. And he's Colin James, who's here tonight. Recently, I was in Auckland and attended a writer's talk at the Public Art Gallery there. And novelist Emily Perkins and poet David Eggleton were talking about fact and fiction. The gallery presenter asked them how their work related to truth. The poet said he started off with truth and added ambiguities and ambivalences, And I was feeling very strongly that I work the other way. I start with the complexities, the ambiguities, the ambivalence, and I go towards truth. The novelist said she started with facts, a delay of art, and ended up with what she said was a sense of truthiness. I write about it the way it is. It is truth as I see it. I write about my ups and my downs, both personal and professional. I write about trying to sort out the world, achieve world peace. I describe messing with New Zealand politics during the modern era. That relates to the Secret Service investigation on me, and I write in detail about that. I believe my story is inspiring. I think it's also entertaining and informative. And I invite you to buy a copy. Welcome your feedback too, and there's a website at the end of the book that you can provide me with feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.